Speaker. My time as a paramedic for well over a decade in this province, I've seen all too often the many overdoses, the results of overdoses, whether it's within our street communities, whether it's in rich homes, poor homes, all too often. And as we try to personalize this, and I know often it's said in government, don't get too operational, think high level, but we need to humanize this. And we see some of the human faces in the gallery today of families that have lost loved ones. And I want every member in this chamber to stop what you're doing and listen for a second. We can all relate to a family that has a 14-year-old boy. You may have a 14-year-old boy or daughter. It's a Saturday night. Your child comes home, curfew as normal, nothing's out of the ordinary. You go down 20 minutes later into the basement or the rumpus room to check on your child. And the child's unresponsive. They're no longer breathing. This is not a homeless person or an addict on the street, on the corner in a back alley. This is in a middle-class home, suburbia of Alberta. By the time the paramedics get there, I know because I was one of those paramedics, the child is no longer breathing and we have no idea how long the child hasn't been breathing for. That 14-year-old will never get the chance to be a leader like us, to help somebody else with addiction or mental health, or to hug their parents. This is what we're talking about. And yes, we're talking about a public health emergency or a provincial state of emergency. Look, let's face it. Overdose has been happening in this province for a long time. What has changed? Well, let's ask the folks in High River. High River flooded over and over and over and over again. And at times there were local states of emergency. And what did they do? They brought more sandbags. They tried this, they tried that. What changed for them to get a public or a provincial state of emergency? The water overflowed every single sandbag, every solution that had been put forward, and drowned the town and other communities in this province. I'm sure there have been forest fires in Fort McMurray before that have encroached close to the city. But what changed? The fire consumed most of the town. What is happening today? This drug is overflowing our communities. That's what has changed. Our perception of it has changed. The way drug dealers operate. Carfentanil, a grain of sand, carfentanil, is enough to kill a human being. And if they don't die, enough to shut down vital organs. And definitely enough to destroy a family. And all it takes is a drug dealer, because I'm assuming the ones that are making the pills and all the other drugs that kids may be interested in, make no mistake, each one of you in this house has a loved one. There's a good chance they might try a drug. And if that drug dealer pressed some other drug and that piece of carfentanil that wasn't cleaned up, like that 14-year-old, an honest mistake takes their life. The honourable member from Calgary-West worked alongside me in downtown Calgary. I can tell you that over time, perhaps Conservative governments, and as things change and as we evolve, this caucus does support safe injection sites. The honourable member from Calgary-West supported those initiatives as a police officer. And all the other tools that we use and are using now are important, absolutely. But you know what? For the families in the gallery, for the family of that lost loved one, there was no Narcan kit for them.
The majority of these overdoses are happening outside of our most populated downtown areas. As we heard, they're happening in Grand Prairie. They're happening in suburban parts of our communities where families, not every one of them has a naloxone kit. And naloxone, whether you aerosolize it or inject it, doesn't always save people. Sometimes it's too late. So when we think about this, and calling a public state of emergency, what these families want to hear are not, well, we tried this, and we're trying that. And quite frankly, they're sick and tired of us blaming one another because to them, doesn't bring back their loved one. And they're here today with their bravery and around this province trying to prevent another one. What they want to hear and what a public state of emergency does or a public health emergency does for these people says, not they're there, but we're fighting for you. We recognize that this drug is overflowing our streets and killing our children and our loved ones. Now that's the drug itself. And the honourable member from Calgary-West has brought policing solutions to the government. There's lots of ideas, and we can go around and around and around. But if we're going to save lives, we need to put money into mental health. Now, during the floods in High River, the provincial state of emergency allowed us to coordinate with different agencies and, again, pull money from the Treasury to the tune of $5 million to support mental health. Families are breaking apart today because we are not brave enough to address the issues around mental health and addiction. And it should be the forefront. We should be teaching kids in our schools about fentanyl and the risk of drug use and abuse and addiction. We should be supporting our educators and our family counselors and our local leaders and church leaders that this is an issue. The best way to do that and to get people to stand up and pay attention to it and coordinate all these efforts like we did in Fort McMurray that got world recognition, like we did in High River, national attention, that brought communities together because the government said this is a priority. And what that state does, and I heard the honourable member, the Honourable Associate Minister of Health say, well, in 30 days, what are we going to change? Well, I can tell you, maybe not a lot for those who are already addicted, but you're going to start the ball rolling with these agencies that you mean business. And that initial coordination keeps that momentum to do what? Save families. Now, I was on the phone last night with a constituent, a brave lady with a brave son. Her name's Jacqueline. Her son's name is Jacob. He wrote a paper that spoke about the Charters of Rights and Freedoms for Canadians. And what they feel for his older brother, it's a plea for their older brother who's on the streets of Vancouver now because of an addiction and suffering from mental health. They have no avenue in which a public state of emergency would allow us to have a conversation about that charter, to maybe open it up for these folks who no longer have the mental capacity, but still have the right to go kill themselves. That's what a state of emergency does. It allows us to open up pieces of legislation that normally might not be opened up, to have a conversation with our federal counterparts, to show them that we mean business. Now, I know everybody in this House truly means business when it comes to fentanyl. So let's show Albertans that we're going to stand up and fight for them by calling this state of emergency. I deplore the government. Thank you, Madam Speaker.